Hi, welcome to J Kind Gaming. I'm Adam. Today I'm going to be doing just a discussion, going over some notes. Essentially, what I'm going to be going over is the GURPS game that I recently really abandoned. Like I mentioned a couple times, I was running like a Sci-Fi GURPS campaign. Ultimately, the couple of the players ended up with schedule changes on the evening that I was running it. So I was either, alright, totally change where it goes, or drop that one and start a new one. And the whatever, I think 3 people that I had left were interested in, trying to go with a different sort of campaign style. So, and since I didn't have anything to unbox, haven't put that much into expense, I figured I'd go over some of my notes, a bit of what I know as far as that. Essentially, the campaign started because I'd read first the GURPS Basic Set Characters book, cover to cover. I did a review of that. Currently, I'm still, if you look over in the the corner there, I have those books there. I'm a little bit into each of those, and then I'm maybe a third of the way into the second core book, the campaigns book. I'm focusing on this one now. It'll probably be the next one that the next GURPS book I review when I get around to it. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to start. I want to start another campaign. Is I want to keep a campaign going because it helps encourage me to go through them. Because I've gotten through the combat, and I'm now going through healing and that kind of stuff. But really, I mean, the campaign came out of, all right, what do you want to do? I sort of sat down with my friends. I was like, what kind of game do you want me to run? And ultimately, and I'll just go over some of my process that I went through, because it is all very much on the notes. I mean, we decided futuristic and tech level 11. A lot of that was just sort of voting with, I forget, I had like 6 or 7 people in the group. 6 people, I think. 7 by the end, and then it dropped down to 3 available. So I ended it. We decided, futuristic space travel would be the main goal, with no or light fantasy, and they said that aliens were cool. Essentially refined technology from an advanced Earth society, so it's based on our galaxy, that kind of thing, and the characters are currently of the current tech level. And I made the races. I sort of sat there, I took an hour just off to the side to make up what my races were. The simple, and to give a few options for what races they could be. The simple one obviously was human. Human was the 0-point cost, all of the points you got, because I made it a 150-point game with a 75 disadvantage limit. Check out GURPS if you want to know what things mean. It's a fun system. But essentially, it's a point buy, you get points, and that's how you build your character. So, human would give them all those points for whatever they wanted to do. But, nothing fancy. And with that, human, English was the native language. I just used English for Earth language. Because I'm an American, and there's other languages? It's English, right? Everyone speaks English, don't they? Anyways, then the next option was robot. And robot had a various cost. Essentially, I gave them, if they wanted to be a robot, I would work with them on what kind of robot they wanted to build. I just decided, I wasn't going to make one type of robot. There's different robots, whatever. And I just had some basic note. They could have any language. I gave the page for where the machine meta trait was. Then I made 3 races where I kind of was like, all right, what kind of feel do I want? The first one was I wanted some sort of alien-esque thing. Let's see. I don't know where did I put them. Anyways, so the first one I did was the aspects. Aspects, they have some sort of psionic power. They're essentially, in my view, they were the elves. They had extra will. They were thin. They had good memory. They sort of were attuned with emotions. They were sensitive to their emotions. they lived longer. They were long-lived, needed less sleep. They were all colorblind. They had color blindness, and Apex was their native language. So they were sort of my build of the elves, the psychic, that level of alien. I wanted one of those sort of superior aliens. They came from the higher technology level to begin with. They were the ones that had been more advanced. I'll give it. And then the next race was the Tarnok. And the Tarnok, if we're going into a fantasy setting, they would be the werewolves. They're the wolves. They're the beast, the monster. They had extra strength and health. They were ugly. They were ugly to the point where they considered their own species ugly. Just as far as what was physically attractive, that was not them. They were gnarly and mangled and hairy. They had claws. They did have a high pain threshold. They had infrared vision, which they could turn on and off. Sharp teeth. They had a bad temper. Garl was their native language. And their society was a collapsed one. They had been from they had been from a planet, and essentially when they had started space exploration, not long after, their society, essentially the planet became so toxic and unlivable that's what partially forced them into this space exploration world. They were hairy beast-like creatures. Oh wait, whatever. Hairy beast-like creatures that they walked on their hind legs. They had brown fur to gray if they were old. They were, werewolf-like creatures, and their eyes were either like a milky blue or brown color, and then they would shift to red when they were using their infrared vision. I forgot I did have a line up here for aspects as skinny, gray-skinned, hairless humanoid aliens. They were the elves, the typical aliens. So we have those, and now we have the Tarnok, which were the monstrous race of aliens. And then I had the miners. The miners I viewed almost like the gnomes. My group decided that they were the Mexican labor force. They were the... Anyways, they had good decks. They were small. They were well adapted to jumping. Essentially, they would push off from their hands. They had longer arms, sort of like a monkey build. They had ultrasonic speech and a short lifespan. They could start with any language. They were albino. They were white. They were the minor are small albino humanoids with slightly longer than seems arms than seems normal. They often walked on fours, but they didn't need to. At least when they were in calm situations, and they used their arms to push off for their jumps. Yeah, and they were the one, they didn't get their own, of the four races that are really in the space exploration, the larger game of the world, those were the four races plus robots. Humans had advanced their society to get there, based on things. Aspects had been there for a long time. Tarnok had gotten there. The miners, I believe it was the Aspects, who had gone, and they had essentially elevated them as a labor force to the space game. They bred quickly, they grew up to the point where they were mature and could work sooner. They were the labor force. And here at the bottom I go over my languages, because there is English, Apex, Garl, those are all from the races. Miner had their own race, called Miner as well, but it was not necessarily the default. Miners didn't have to start with it, they didn't need to know it. A lot of miners didn't speak Miner, because it can't communicate with anyone else. It can only communicate to other miners because it required the ultrasonic speech. So I made that sort of they could have their secret talk if they need. So that could, I was like putting in an option for that, which no one used. And there is no written form of that. And then I had two robot languages, binary and chunk. And essentially that was based on the two different groups of technology. Humans sort of had a middle technology ground, but Tarnok had a very chunk, what I would call technology. They were it would essentially, whereas Aspects were very binary. And it's really the difference is WALL-E. Wally, that robot, that would be a chunk robot. And Eve would be the binary robot. And essentially it's that, whether it's the sleek technology or that grungy sort of oil technology. And those were sort of the division I had in there. And then I had, you know, how those robot languages could interface with people. So that really, this sheet was all I had for starting the campaign. It was my, here's what I need. And people made characters. I know I had a Tarnok who was, you know, set on reclaiming the Tarnok world and making it livable again. I had a human that was essentially Mega Man. I had someone that was obsessed with eating, and major eating disorders. Anyways, yeah, I had some interesting characters from some of my friends. Then I sort of went into the world, and I sort of made notes a couple different ways on this piece of paper. Essentially, I had, you know, Quadrant 37, and that was where the war is. I decided, whatever, there should be a war on. So we made a war on. And essentially that's where all the civilians had been cleared and there was open battle between a rebel force. And ultimately that's how I began the campaign, was the rebel force was all of a sudden made an attack outside of the quadrant where the players happened to be. There was also the Galactic Center. It was essentially a system with three, what were essentially from Star Wars Coruscant, 3 city planets covered in cities. That was, you know, the Earth Sol system was what I called, you know, the human homelands, and they had Jupiter mines. I used whatever, mining minerals from Jupiters as fuel for the space stations. If you know science, I doubt that works, but I don't know, maybe it does. Whatever. I decided spaceships work my way in my universe. Someone asked about teleportation. I went with the theory of, nah, we have total teleportation, but it separates the molecules. So you can teleport something, it's just not going to come in the same way. Which, in some aspects, you know, great. You know, you can get, like, one of the things was, you know, was for things like you can all of a sudden get pure gold. You know, we could just send whatever gold with whatever impurities, and all of a sudden the gold is here, and next to it is everything that was making it impure. Pure gold over here. Yet, as far as sending even water, your hydrogen and your oxygen are separated. People, that makes a bit of a mess. You got your carbon and your... But, so I decided no teleportation, ultimately, for most uses in-game. And then I made what was my main NPC, which was their spaceship. And essentially the campaign began, they were in a place that was attacked. They were ended up almost stranded, and the spaceship shows up to rescue them. And it's a spaceship built with a personality. It was quirky. I had a spaceship that was 5M113. Essentially, if you write that out, it's smile. It's sort of elite text. And he was happy, and he was glad that he was there. And it was a very one-minded character that made it where it was easy for me to pick it up every week. And it was sort of my vehicle for traveling them through the campaign as needed. But, you know, so I took notes for that character over a couple pages just so I'd remember some stuff. I had a couple of robots in him that I have some notes on. They had a location that I thought they might visit multiple times if the game had lasted longer. I took notes on. Actually, this was back in November, I guess, that I was doing it early. I took notes on stuff about the world itself. I was November's National Novel Writing Month, and I totally got almost a chapter done before giving up. Then I took notes just sort of time scale, and then of course the characters. So that's, you know, I write down a lot of notes. I was at some point intending I might build 5M113 as like in GURPS, but at this point I was, you know, it was an interesting robot. It had a habit of its main attack. It ran into things. It had essentially force shields on it that allowed it to not receive damage when it was running into something. There was a point where they came across a much larger ship and they needed to stop it, and he was like, "I'll take care of that." and he kind of crashed through it, and that devastated it, and then they were left to jump off and, you know, in their spacesuits and go take care of the mess. Really, the first time that they met Smile was, you know, they were stranded on this rubble platform that had been, you know, space platform that had been destroyed. He bumped into it until they could hop off. You know, it was an interesting character. I might bring him back in some other campaign, because I have notes for later. Anyways, I'll probably type up some of the race notes at least for you. I'll put those on the website. Of course, I'll link to the whatever page where you can get GURPS supplements. Do check out GURPS. I don't know. My discussion of my old campaign, just sort of the setting wasn't too boring. But yeah, and that was a pretty short campaign. That was only a few months. They probably ended a month and a half ago. Just as people started, you know, at first, you know, one guy was like, had, you know, his work changed, and I was like, okay, maybe he'll change back again. But then others started doing so as well, until I'm down to less than half the starting group. So I ended it. I'm starting, I don't know, I'm going through that same process again of, because now I have really 3 people that are going to commit to being there, that want to play GURPS. I have a 4th, but he's sort of on the mindset if he wants us to play it more, so the rest of the group knows it before he bothers continuing trying to learn it. So 3 that are probably going to be there and want to play, and so I'm going through with them, trying to figure out what the next campaign's going to be. At this point, it looks like it's going to be Sci-Fi again, of the books back there. A couple of those are fantasy, but I haven't gotten to those yet, so I'm like, whatever, stick with Sci-Fi. I'm not going to get more better for quite some time with that. So I'll share that if you want to just sort of pull from some of the races, if any of those sounded interesting. I had fun with them. But yeah, have a good day. I'll put some links up. See you next week, probably. I can think of something else to talk to. Hey, bye.